Hi guys. So, what are we going to do today? Last week's video, I gave you a very brief and quick overview of noise reduction using local adjustments in the upcoming version of Raw Therapee, or the current version of Raw Therapee if you're on one of the dev builds, the nightly build, the dev build for Mac or whatever. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it again on another image, a relatively simple image. But I had one or two people in the comments say, can you do something about workflow? Now then, workflow. Can I just say that I hear this term workflow bandied around all the time, and there isn't a fixed workflow. You have to remember that every single raw file you take is 100% unique. And so doing the same thing to multiple raw files doesn't always get the best out of any of those raw files. So your workflow, how can I put this? Your workflow, you shouldn't look at having a fixed workflow. You should treat each image individually, unless you're into batch processing for stock or whatever. And even then, up to a point, you should tailor your workflow to the individual image. So what I'm going to do today is pick an image, and I'm going to do my full Raw Therapee workflow, and then to finish it off, I'm going to take it into Photoshop because I want to do something to the image that it is impossible to do in the likes of Raw Therapee, Lightroom or whatever. It's got to go into Photoshop. Or if you're into the free software market, you'd have to go into GIMP, but don't ask me how to do it in GIMP because I don't use GIMP because I don't like it. Okay. For goodness sake, people, stop asking me when Raw Therapee 5.9 is coming out, because I don't know, as I said in the video last week. But you don't really need to wait for Raw Therapee 5.9 because you can go and download one of the dev builds. Alrighty, or the nightly build. I'm not in the nightly build at the minute. I'm in the Mac dev build, which is probably 3 weeks old, I think, something like that. Anyway, neither here nor there. So I'm working on a whitetail seagull shot taken out of a boat that's rocking around, so I'm on an unstable platform, and I'm running at somewhere between 7 and 10 frames a second, and yeah, seriously, doing these whitetail seagulls in Norway is the hardest thing you will ever do with a camera. People never believe you until you actually take them to do it, and then they go, oh my god. But anyway, it's beside the point. Out of this particular sequence of shots, I rather like this shot here. Now, you can tell it's underexposed. Why is it underexposed, Andy? It's underexposed. They're all underexposed. When you look at them in the file browser, inside of Raw Therapee, they don't look underexposed. Well, this one does now, but they don't look underexposed because what you're looking at is the baked in JPEG out the camera that's got the camera's image adjustments on it. So why is this shot underexposed? Well, it's quite simple really. You've got to take into account the lighting conditions and the way the birds are orientated towards the light or the sun, and the fact that you're expecting water splashes and things, and you don't want a boatload of stuff blown out. And experience tells me that the sides of these beaks on these eagles is very prone to blowing out, especially in side lighting. Now, I like the composition of this image if we take it out to a fit to screen view. I do like the composition of the image. I'm not particularly bothered about the out of focus snow-capped hills and rocky outcrops over here, but I do like the bird being positioned this way in the frame because for editorial work it's desirable because it opens up sales for double page spreads, so they can put text all down here on a right facing page and the image is still on the left facing page. So, you've always got to think about composition and things like that. But the image is on the ski width, it's crooked, and the bird itself, this is a camera error with the original 1DX. You'll always get it when you're doing high speed action. It'll drop focus. Ostensibly you'd think that was motion blur. It isn't. It's 2,000th of a second, and it's just one of those things. The camera's just not autofocused properly, and yet on the preceding frame and the subsequent frame it's focused perfectly. So you'll always get dropped shots when you're doing high speed sports action wildlife. So, and you've got to keep that finger on the old shutter button. So this shot is, as you can see, unusable. But as I said, I do like the composition. Now if I go back to the file browser and I go to the previous image, wait for it, and there we go, and you can see when it loads up that this image is sharp where it needs to be. Now it is processed, and what we're going to do is process it again, but if I bring it out to a fit to screen view, rather like that, you can see firstly there are two small circles here. Well, there's a small one and a somewhat larger one, so you should by now realise that I've got two local adjustments on there, and we're going to go through all that in a moment. But I like the pose of the bird because it's very reminiscent of the pose of the bird in the subsequent frame, and with the legs hanging down, but this closer leg is not impinged upon by this nearest wing. So yeah, I do like the pose of the bird, but I actually want the bird over here. This is a panning error on my part, and so yeah, there you go. Now we cannot move this bird inside of Raw Therapee, so it's got to go, in my case, over into Photoshop. So the image is going to go into Photoshop as part of the final workflow, in inverted commas. Right, so what we're going to do, well, first of all, I'm going to switch this back. What I'll do is I'll switch it out to a neutral profile. What I would do is, ordinarily, I would have it loaded up with mybase.pp3 automatically, but I'll switch it out to a neutral profile because mybase.pp3 just builds on that, and we'll go and build mybase.pp3. So we switch from Amaze demosaic into RCD plus bilinear, and then we go to auto correction for chromatic aberration, but I always uncheck avoid color shift, because if you check avoid color shift, it can sometimes create a color shift. So there you go. I'm going to invoke capture sharpening, but I'm going to leave a checkbox in there, and on the contrast threshold for the RCD plus bilinear, in other words the dual demosaic algorithm, I'll just leave a checkbox in there momentarily, and if I think it needs adjusting, I'll come back and change it. But please note, this is just capture sharpening. We're not actually putting any other sort of sharpening on the image. So I'm just going to come back to the details panel, and I'm going to activate noise reduction. We'll leave luminance noise reduction set at slider, so that means, seeing as the slider is default set to 0, there's no luminance noise reduction taking place on this image. However, we do have automatic global chrominance or colour noise reduction active. Right, now ostensibly what I would do, we've got nothing else selected. The only other thing I would do is come to colour, and I would switch the output profile to Pro Photo. rather like that, and then I would just go save, and I would save it as mybase.pp3. Alrighty, so I'm just going to not bother saving that because we're done. Alright, now then, I'm not going to do anything fancy on this image. I'm just going to process it as I would process a stock image. Alright, so I'm going to come to the exposure tab first of all, and I want to brighten the image up. Now, in a lot of cases, if this was a landscape done on a high megapixel count camera, I wouldn't do what I'm going to do here. I would actually do it in lab. But, I mean, just for the sake of expediency and quickness, I'm actually going to brighten the image up using the exposure compensation slider. And if we look over at the RGB parade histogram, I could really do with the tops of these 3 channel histograms being a little bit closer to this middle line here. So I'm just going to dial in probably about 1.9, getting on for 2 stops. And you can see they've moved up just above that middle line. Well, the blue one has. Now, I could go and white balance the image, as we did in the video last week. But I quite like the coolness, the slight bluiness of this image. I just do it sort of goes with the sort of steely blue-grey of the sky. And so I'm going to stick with it. But, you see, the shot was at 400 ISO on a Canon 1DX. Now, the Canon 1DX at 400 ISO, you've got probably 7.5, 8 stops of dynamic range. So, I know what ISO my camera's shooting at, and I know that I've got specular highlights on the side of this bird's beak that are going to blow if I push the exposure too far, or if I push the exposure too far in camera prior to capture. So, you know, you've always got to be thinking ahead. And, you know, I mean, he doesn't look too bad, but because of the relatively low dynamic range of the camera, especially down in the shadow end, I know that these shadows are going to now contain noise because I've bumped the exposure up in post by around about 2 stops. So I just want to get the noise in these darker areas under control. So all I'm fundamentally going to do is pull up the local adjustments, and I'm just going to add a local adjustment spot. I'm going to show additional settings. And the first thing I'm going to do is change it from a normal spot to a full image spot. And then I'm going to add to the current tool blur grain denoise, and we're going to come into denoise, and I'm just going to go for a conservative noise reduction. Now you can see that we've reduced the noise in there very, very significantly. However, you can see down here, in this area here, we've got quite a few speckly artifacts. So, as I did in the video last week, I'm going to come over to the details panel, and I'm just going to turn on impulse noise reduction, and now you'll see those speckles have gone. If I sort of zoom into this area a bit more, and just maybe if I move it up a little bit like that, if I turn off impulse noise reduction, you can see these dark speckles in here. If I just go and turn it on and leave it at its default 50, you can see most of them go away. Now, in last week's video, I gave you, a very, very, very basic, rough, ready introduction to noise reduction on local adjustment. But once I'd done that, I did go on to show you the sort of different levels of control we can bring to bear on these local adjustment spots. just very briefly. I mean, we didn't turn any of them on because it'd just make the video too long. And I don't want this video to go on too long either, but it will be longer than last week's. So we're just going to push things with the levels of control. We're just going to push things just that little bit further this week. So I don't know if video compression will allow you to see this, but there are some random sort of magenta and green blotches going on in here. And so if I come back to local adjustments, I am just going to come down to, I will talk about non-local means luminance noise reduction in another video. So we're just going to skip straight past that. And we've got these two controls here, fine chroma and coarse chroma. And I'm just going to move both fine chroma, and you can see now a lot. I really do hope you can see this with video compression. I just don't know. But now virtually all of that excess colour noise in these very dark areas is gone. I'm just going to take on the coarse chroma as well and just move that up just a little bit. I might come back to the details panel because we can still see we've got one or two speckles there, and I might turn up the impulse noise reduction to around about 60 and just see if that makes a little bit of a difference. Not very much, but we'll leave it where it is. And so you can see fundamentally that we've really gone a long way to dropping the level of noise and general artifacting in these darker, shadowy areas, which have not had much exposure in the first place at 400 ISO, and then they've been bumped up by virtually 2 stops in that initial exposure compensation step of the processing. So if I turn off local adjustments, now you can see that's what the image looks like to begin with, and that's what it looks like now. So what we could do with now is sort of visualizing where that noise reduction is taking place. And so if I just go to preview AE, that will show me a mask. Now this mask is always active. It's not really a mask, it's just giving you an indication of the distribution of the noise reduction within that localized adjustment, which, don't forget, is spanning the whole image. Now, things can get a little bit misleading here. Where it's very solid green, that's where the maximum noise reduction is taking place. And so you can see there is some noise reduction taking place in the sky, which is all well and good, but perhaps I don't want the noise reduction in the sky being taken care of with this adjustment. So what we can do is, under scope, under denoise, don't get this confused with this scope here, just this particular scope slider here. If I move this to the left, I'm actually making the contents, if you like, or the activity, based on the adjustments that we're applying to that local spot. I'm narrowing down the colours and tones that activity, or that workflow activity of general denoising, I'm limiting where it is taking place. And so that's the fundamental crux of the expansion of your knowledge and understanding of denoise distribution under local adjustments that I wanted to get over today, using this preview AE. And so what I can do is I can turn it down even more, turn it down to about 6, And now you can see we are really dialing in on these darker areas. And because we're using a full image spot, it's even identified areas up here where it needs to apply a certain amount of noise reduction. But the density of, or volume of noise reduction that is being applied, you can see the green coloration here in these top primaries is nowhere near as strong as it is here, because colour and tone wise these areas are not, they are closely related to the areas underneath the spot. You know, they're obviously more closely related to it in colour and tone than the sky is, because the sky's bloody blue. But, you know, it's a variable thing that we're working with here. And so if I turn off Preview AE, now we can fundamentally go back to a 100% view. In fact, we'll go in much larger than that. And you sort of say to yourself, well, have we got too much noise reduction going on in there? Let's blow it up a little bit more and have a look. Because what we can do is come into this equalizer panel here, and if I go to our coarser details slider, or well, not coarser details slider, I go to the coarser details end of the equalizer, and then I sort of bring down the finer details, you can see I'm sort of bringing some of that noise back. Let's just go and turn off local adjustments and then turn it back on. I think that looks pretty much a-okay. This bit's looking a little bit ropey down here, but seriously, in a digital file, nobody's going to be looking at this at 700%, and even if we were to print it, it wouldn't show. Alrighty, so there's some of you become something of a hypochondriac over noise, and I keep telling you not to. So, you know, just bear that in mind. Okay, so if we remember when I first showed you this image, we got two active spots. I want to put a little bit of noise reduction on the sky. Alrighty, but if you remember, I've removed the noise reduction from this spot in the sky with the scope slider when we were looking at this Preview AE. Okay, rather like that. So turn that Preview AE off. I need to add a new spot. This spot I want to be on the sky. I'm going to change it from a normal spot to a full image spot. Okay, I might just go and say show additional settings so I can increase the spot size. Alrighty, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We're going to go to add blur, grain and denoise as a tool. We're going to go for denoise, and we're just going to stick this in conservative, and there we go. And if we look at the Preview AE, let's just come out to a fit to screen view, rather like that. If we go and hit Preview AE, and then I'm going to pull the denoise scope down until we are just fundamentally working on the sky, rather like that. And so you can see that the bird is now in black and white, if you like, and the spot scope is down at 11, and so all we've got is this green in the sky, which is indicating where the actual level of noise reduction is taking place. So I'm just going to turn off Preview AE because I don't need to see that anymore because it's all weird. And so what we'll do is we'll scoot this over into Photoshop, where I can go and do my recomposition work. Yes! Ho, 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 ho. Exciting stuff. And there it is, as if by magic. Yes, because I've just cut a big chunk of video out. Alrighty. let's go and have a look at the image at 100%. Yep, that's looking pretty damn cool as far as I'm concerned. Now, the one thing I'm going to have to do is duplicate said layer. Okay, and I'm just going to turn off the padlock on this bottom layer. It doesn't really matter which layer you do this operation on, but this is just the order that I do it. So I'm working on this background copy layer, which is on top of the old background layer, which, because I've taken the padlock off, is now referred to as layer 0. And I'm going to come out to a fit to screen view, and I'm going to pick up my pen tool. I'm going to get my lasso tool, and I'm just going to roughly lasso around the bird, rather like that. And we are just going to go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. And there we go. And that's done a pretty good job of removing the bird. And I'm just going to click OK. And so if I go to select, deselect, yeah, it looks all right. If we go up to 100%, can we actually see any errors in there? We might have seen an error if we hadn't done the noise reduction. And the error might well have been a difference in apparent noise level between the rest of the sky and this content aware fill created artificial sky. But nonetheless, it all works quite well. So all I'm going to do now is to just select those two layers, right click, group from layers, and we'll call that sky. All right, so I've got my sky in a group, and if I turn that off, I've got my bird. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do is activate the sky, but I'm going to pull it underneath the layer with the bird on. And now what we need to do is to select said birdie. Now I'm just going to go image, duplicate, all right, because I might come back to that in a moment. Now there is a standard workflow for inside of Photoshop for doing what I'm about to do, and you've seen me demonstrate it before, which is to go to select, and we could go to focus area. Now this works 99% of the time, it works flawlessly, alrighty, but on this image it doesn't, and this just goes to reinforce what I said before about having a fixed workflow. You can't afford to have a fixed workflow because that workflow might work on well on one image, but nowhere near as effectively on another. And you've seen me demonstrate, if you go back through my library of videos, those of you who are fresh to the channel, I have demonstrated this before, and when I've demonstrated it, it's worked perfectly. So all I'm going to do is output this to a selection with soften edge active, and we'll click OK. And then all we're going to do is click on the masking icon, and now you can see this mask is totally black apart from the birdie, yeah? And I can go and get my move tool, and I can go and move that bird wherever I want. And ostensibly you think that looks really, really brilliant. However, if I go into it at more than 100%, yeah, you'll see there's little errant bits of the beak that have been missed, and it's just where there's a low contrast differentiation between the bird and the sky. It's sort of eaten into the bird a little bit. If I actually turn this mask off by shift clicking on it, you can see the amount of bird which has been removed. Okay, so if I come over to this copy image and I come and toot it 100%, yep, and we'll just sort of scoot him along a little bit rather like that. How else can we select it? Well, instead of trying to select the bird, let's select what it is that we're trying to separate it from. These are the sky. Yes. So the first thing I'm going to do, if your foreground and background image swatches look black and white or any other colour, just go and get the colour sampler tool or the colour picker tool and just tap on the sky. And that'll put your foreground colour to that of the sky. It's not really important, but it is helpful, because what we're going to do is go to select and we're going to go to colour range, because with the sky being at the blue end of the spectrum and the bird being at the red end of the spectrum, red, orange, yellow end of the spectrum, we can get good colour separation. So all we're going to do is just click and drag in this thumbnail here, yep, until we've got the majority of the sky white and the bird black. We could go invert, so we've got the majority of the bird white and the sky black, and we can just go OK. And then what we could do is now go and add a layer mask. So you can see we've got the same sort of layer mask as we had before. Couple of problems. If I go into it at more than 100%, you can see we haven't got the problem with the selection eating into the bird as much, but it's quite jagged. You can see we've got more of the beak, more of the bird's head, but it is quite jagged. So what we need to do is we need to take a little bite out of the inside of the mask. In other words, what we need to do is we need to expand the white area just a little bit. And so it's really simple. If we control click on the mask, that pulls up the selection from which the mask is derived. Actually, before I do that, I need to do something else. I need to fix the mask. So we'll just go to Command Z to deselect, and I just need to alt click on the mask. And you can see the mask has got A, it's got a jagged outline, and B, it's got some little errant dark pixels in it, which fundamentally mean it's not functioning 100% how we want it. But if I come out to a fit to screen view, you can see I need to fundamentally do a repair on this mask before we go any further. So I'm just going to get my brush tool, painting with black, and we will actually just paint out those white bits there, and it's usually up in the corners or down in the corners where we get a bit of a problem. Right, so that's the mask fixed. Okay, so I'm just going to click back on the image, but then I'm going to command click on the mask to bring that selection back up, and we'll take this into a 100% view. In point of fact, we'll go command plus, and you can see how that selection's very, very, very tight to the bird, yeah? And so we're not eating into the pixels that... We're not eating into the bird's head. We're not eating into the bird's outline at all, but it's jagged. In other words, it's not anti-aliased. So, and you can see we've got odd little bits there that shouldn't really be included in the selection, but they are all going to disappear in a moment. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to select, and I'm going to come to modify, and what we're going to do is go to expand. And all I'm going to do is expand this selection outwards by 1 pixel. Make sure apply effect at canvas bounds is unchecked, otherwise things will go all messy I mean, they wouldn't necessarily go messy on this particular image, but if you're doing this on a bloody landscape, it'd go very messy. Alrighty, so, or it could go very messy. So we click OK. And now you can see that selection has jumped out. It's moved away from the outline of the bird, from the boundaries of the bird, all the way around the image. And you'll notice those errant little random, odd few pixel selections that were present are now no longer present. But if I actually command click on the mask, you can see that, yeah, now we've got those little bits back. So if I just go edit, and I just go undo load selection. So that's our new selection. So what I need to do now is to, I need to make this expansion mean something in the mask. So I've got to click on the mask, and basically I've got to get my paintbrush and I've got to expand the white up to that selection, because remember we've just expanded it by 1 pixel. And what that will do is that will broaden the mask all the way around by 1 pixel, and it will get rid of those errant dark pixels within the mask. So all we're going to do is come out to a fit to screen view, and well, not fit to screen view, but you know what I mean. And we're going to paint with white. And we're going to paint with white at an opacity of 100% and a flow of 100%. And we're just going to scribble white paint all across the bird. But the only places it's going to affect are those areas within the marching ants. Well, not marching ants, but within the selection. And so we'll just give that a good going over, rather like that. I would imagine we've got everything now. And if I out-click on said mask, now you can see that the mask is nicely cleaned up. We'll just go to select, deselect, and if we blow the mask up to 100%, you can now see there are no pixels, no errant dark pixels in there. So we've got full opacity of the bird and complete removal of the sky from that mask, and it's a nice clean mask. And if we come back and click on the actual image itself and we zoom out, and then we go and pick up our move tool, and then we can go and put the bird exactly where we want it. And then let's go into it at 100%. In fact, we'll go in it at 200%, and we'll just sort of bring it down. And if you think that the bird's beak just needs a bit of a tidy up, we can go and get our brush tool, and we can really make it go super small. Come on, down you come. That'll just about do. And what we can do is we can reset to black and white. And what can we do now? Let's just turn the mask off. So it's shift click on the mask, and you can see that, yeah, the bird's beak could do with perhaps a little bit of a clean up, not much, because we've kept pretty much everything that needs to be kept within the bird itself. Yeah, but you know, say you got a little bit of an error on the side of the mask, what we could do is just paint with black on the mask, yeah, and we could just sort of tone it down just a little bit in certain areas. Yeah, but what I'm doing now is I'm rubbing through the mask to actually reveal what was underneath. So there you go. I mean, we could now go layer, flatten image, but before we do, let's just go and have a look at this original methodology for doing the same job. And you know, fundamentally it will work with your images 99 times out of 100, but as I said before, With this image, it just doesn't work, and you'd have to do an awful lot more work on this mask. I mean, you can go in with the mask and just expand the light area on that and just start to bring the bird's beak back. But, you know, it's just more efficient to do it this way by using a select colour range as opposed to a select subject. So there you go, guys and girls. I hope that's proved useful for you. Bit of a mixed bag, little bit on workflow, little bit on leveraging the power of raw therapy to do what raw therapy's good at, and a little bit of leveraging the power of Photoshop to do what Photoshop's good at, to actually give us the image that we wanted, which is the bird over to one side. Yeah, so there you go. Oh, you've got something useful out of that, guys and gals. If you have, give it a thumbs up, give it a like, leave a nice comment down below. Don't leave a nasty one, because I won't publish it, because I see everything before it goes live. So, you know, some people actually disliked last week's video. I can't for the life of me think what I did for them to dislike it, but well, there you go. Each to their own. It's a funny old world we live in. So, anyway, guys and girls, as I said before, hope you found that useful. Hope you got something interesting out of it. So, until the next time, stay safe, stay well. Keep your head down, keep your nose clean. Yes, don't get up to anything I wouldn't do, so gives you quite a lot of scope, that does. And until the next time, guys and gals, see you soon. Tooroo.